Thank you, Mel. Somebody was telling me that Paul McCartney has recently come out with a new album, and I don't know how old he is. He's up there, though, obviously. And he was being interviewed, and the interviewer said, well, is this your best work? And he said, I was a Beatle, hello. But he's still making music, not because he needs the money, but because he loves his music, and because there are still worlds of undiscovered music within him that he is yet to imagine into existence. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the ethics of imagination. I think it's important to have this conversation because too often as ethical humanists, it can be easy to get caught up in the details. Only the facts, ma'am, just the facts. We like our reality scientifically proven and our calendars to be filled with upcoming events that have 99.9% chance of actually happening. We watch the news with critical thinking. We're not taken by flights of fancy or fake news or email entreaties from Nigerian princes who need our help. You cannot pull the wool over our eyes. And there's nothing wrong with that sentiment. In fact, I think I want my next tattoo to say science is real or something like that. And yet over the past 2 years, we've gone through events that did not have a 99.9% probability of happening, probably weren't even in our calendars. Our trip to Europe was, or our family reunion, or going to visit the new grandbaby. Those were things that had a 99.9% probability of happening, and yet they did not. Instead, a virus swooped in to take center stage in our lives and on our calendars and our news reports. And it's the big news that we have someone here for the first time in 2 years, right? Because of the pandemic that none of us had on our calendar. And we find ourselves in some strange new reality in which now, I don't know about you, but we can never be sure about what's going to happen tomorrow. I remember when the pandemic first hit, I was actually supposed to come out and candidate for the New York Society the weekend of March 20th, 2020. That didn't happen. But then the lockdown was, we're just going to lock down for maybe 2 weeks at first, and then 2 months, and then, as we all know, it turned into one very long year of almost complete lockdown until the vaccines came out. Then the vaccines came out, and I got mine, finished my 2 doses in March of 2021, and I was like, hello, world! And I like to call it my 6 weeks of unfettered joy when we all thought, Dr. Fauci even said, if you've been vaccinated, you probably really don't even need to wear your masks indoors anymore, and we were so excited. I did fly to New York then in April of 2021, and they had a cocktail party for me, and it was the first event for all of us that we weren't wearing masks, because it was in that 6 weeks of unfettered joy. And then Delta hit, right? And all of a sudden we're back into where we were before, and nothing was sure. Once again, everybody's wearing masks again. And then we finally slog our way through that, and we get through the holidays, and then it's Omicron. And so we continue, and what's the irony of it all is that curses, science is the reason. The science of COVID-19 is what's keeping changing. And the scientific attempts to combat it keep changing. Our old, faithful, cold, hard facts, scientific evidence isn't enough anymore to reassure us of where we're going and when we'll get there. In fact, I'm allegedly leaving on a cruise October 18th, and I fly to Athens, Greece, and then the cruise leaves from there, and I have to have, and I wear a mask in the subways, obviously, and I wear a mask in the elevators, but, I've kind of gotten lax now that I've got the Omicron-specific variant, thanks science, but I'm thinking, I feel like I'm going to start wearing my mask for the next 10 days, because what if I get there and I have a positive test? And then I can't go. I've got travel insurance, but that's hardly the point, right? This was a birthday present to myself for my 60th birthday, which I just had, so I'd really like to do it. So it can be easy to wonder, What's next? These events have impacted us globally and intimately in our own lives. We've had to turn on a dime, pivot to face the unexpected challenges from COVID and other areas. And so here we are with another booster, and I got it, and another winter, which the virus loves, coming upon us. Not to mention the war in Ukraine, right? And climate change, which is also tragically real. And the immigrant crisis, and the refugee crisis. And some people might be tempted to just fling their hands in the air at this point in defeat and say, whatever. Or we could do the Matrix move. Bring it. Bring it. But I want to offer us another way, a way that causes us to use our imagination to ethically dream new possibilities into existence. That song Paul McCartney wrote first existed in his mind. Maybe he had he got commissioned by a video game. There's actually some really great music, great soundtracks to video games. But then he's like, okay, what should it be about? Hope. And then he creates in his mind, he imagines this song, and he imagines where the piano will be and where the percussion will be. And then it becomes reality. And he sings it into existence. And the truth is, everything begins in our imagination. Everything that has ever been began first has a thought. The science behind the newest vaccine, as well as the shirt you're wearing, as well as the iPad you're watching this on Zoom, began as a thought first. They were imagined into being. Now, unfortunately, this superpower of creation can be used for good and for bad. An AR-15 was imagined by somebody tasked with the duty to come up with a weapon of war that will kill as many people as possible in as short a time as possible. And now, of course, there are over 200,000 AR-15s in private hands in our citizenry. We aren't equipped to staunch the tide of weapons of mass destruction being imagined right now, whether that's a physical gun or a bomb or a political landmine such as Stop the Steal that has become embedded in the imaginations of a third of our population. But we do have within us the power to imagine a better world, to imagine hope for the future, to color outside the lines of accepted norms, to think unreasonably, as the Landmark Forum puts it. It's reasonable to expect deleterious impacts from climate change or an economic depression. But what if we unreasonably imagine creative solutions that could help save our planet? An economic path forward that will level the playing field, creating access for all rather than for just a few. The power of imagination cannot be underscored enough. In fact, Albert Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all we know now and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. Einstein also said logic will get you from A to Z, imagination will get you everywhere. The ethics of imagination calls upon us to brazenly imagine a better world, to fearlessly proclaim something to be true that is yet just in our imagination. In her essay, To Love the Marigold, in the book, The Impossible Will Take a Little While, A Citizen's Guide to Hope in a Time of Fear, feminist philosopher Susan Griffin relates a story that exemplifies the possibility of envisaging solutions that defy conventional logic. She tells the story of Robert Desnos, who was a famous French poet who was also a member of the French resistance during World War II. And he was caught on passing out information and falsifying identity papers. He was arrested by the Gestapo one morning along with many others who crowded onto the bed of a large truck. And the poet, Robert Desnos, is taken away from the barracks of the concentration camp where he's been held prisoner. So they're on the back of this big truck, all these people leaving the barracks of the concentration camp, and the mood is somber. Everyone knows that the truck is headed for the gas chambers. They've seen it every day. And when the truck arrives, no one can speak at all. They can't even lift their eyes. Even the guards are silent. But soon, this silence is interrupted by an energetic man who jumps into the line and grabs the hand of one of the condemned. Improbable as it is, Desnos reads the man's palm. And he says, "Oh, I see you have a very long lifeline. Look at this. You have a very long life, and you're going to have 3 children. It's fantastic." He's exuberant, and his excitement is contagious. First one man, then another offers up his hand. Read my palm, read my palm. And the prediction is for longevity, for more children, for abundant joy. This poet Desnos just reads the hands of these condemned men crowding near him. And as Desnos reads more palms, not only does the mood of the prisoners change, but that of the guards too. How can one explain it? Perhaps the element of surprise has planted a shadow of doubt in their minds. If they, the guards, had told themselves, and they, the prisoners, had told themselves these deaths were inevitable, this no longer seems so inarguable. They are, in any case, so disoriented by this sudden change of mood among those they are about to kill that they are unable to go through with the executions. So all the men, along with Desnos, are packed back onto the truck and taken back to the barracks. Desnos has saved his own life and those of the other men by using his imagination. Which begs the question, can our imagination save us? Robert Desnos, before his arrest, was famous for his belief in the imagination, and it was in his poetry before he was arrested by the Gestapo. He believed imagination could transform a society, and what a wild leap this was. At the mouth of the gas chambers, to imagine a long life. In his mind, he simply stepped outside the world as it was created by the Nazis. And that is the essence of what we are about here as an ethical society. The ethics of imagination is the recognition that each of us is responsible for creating a better world for ourselves, for our communities, for all peoples. And that we can imagine, just as Desnos did, that better world for us all. What can we dream? What can we imagine? How can we step out from under the shadow of this COVID pandemic that seemingly goes on and on, to imagine a 2023 filled with good health, well-being, joy? What can you as an individual, if you're at a place of despair in your life, of loss, of grief, what can you imagine to bring you into a new life of abundance and joy and hope for the future? Another great story of imagining a different reality and then claiming it was told by Alex Borstein in her 2019 acceptance speech for the Emmy she won for Best Supporting Actress in a Comedy. Borstein, who was accepting her second Emmy in that category for her role as the manager Susie in the series The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, told the story of her grandmother's harrowing escape from the death at the hand of the Nazis. She said, "My grandmother was in a line to be shot into a pit. She said to the guard, 'What happens if I step out of line?' The guard said, I don't have the heart to shoot you, but somebody will. So she stepped out of the line. And Alex said, for that, I am here and my children are here. So step out of line, she said. Step out of line. We can step out of the line if we don't like the line we're in. We can read the poem of our own lives of longevity and joy if we don't like the life someone is telling us is the only one we have. We have within us, everyone does, just as much as Paul McCartney does, we have within us the power of imagination to sidestep this nightmare's vision, for instance, represented by the January 6, 2021 insurrection. We can imagine a democratic society that is a foundation of justice, equity, peace. In our own lives, where do we dare to imagine something different than the line we're currently in? The lifeline someone has said is ours, that we don't like. Is there an area in your life where you're in a line you don't want to be in? Just imagine for a moment, just imagine if you were living a life you truly love, what would be different? How would you act differently? Who would you be? Guess what? You've taken the first crucial step to realizing it, to making it happen. In her poem, A Prayer for Imagination, Rosemary Watola Traumer starts with a quote from Horizons, which is a short film by Jeremy Seifert. In that film, Barry Lopez writes, "The effort of the imagination is to turn the boundary into a horizon because there is no end point for you. The boundary says here and no further. The horizon says, welcome." The effort of the imagination is to turn the boundary into a horizon because there is no end point for you. The boundary says here and no further. The horizon says welcome. Then Rosemary writes this: "There are so many boundaries in me, so many limitations, prisons, places where a line has been drawn, perhaps by another, perhaps by me. The line says stop. The line says don't be curious. The line says make yourself small, now smaller. But the imagination is the big pink eraser that rubs out the lines, smears and disappears them. Sometimes it's more like a tear, a small rip in the known that bids me look through the lines as if peeking through a curtain. And sometimes the imagination takes a line and bends it or twists it like a clown with a balloon, and what I thought was a boundary becomes a bird, becomes crown, becomes flower. Or it turns the line perpendicular so what I thought was a dead line becomes a path. I want to listen for those voices beyond the boundaries, want to open to what I can't yet see. I want to hear the welcome of the horizon, and like a bell calling me home, let it lead me." Isn't that a great poem? There is a horizon waiting to welcome us, a line made perpendicular to become a path. If we can learn to look through the lines, peer beyond the curtain of what should be, of what has always been, or the limit of our own comfort zone, if we can step out of the line of fatalism and the status quo. But we can't just stop at reading lifelines on one another's palms. We must step brazenly into this world we are imagining, a world of peace and justice and love. We must create it from our dreams. So it's not only in our imagination, but in our reality. In that same story with the story about Desnos, Sarah Griffin also says, like artistic and literary movements, social movements are driven by the imagination. I am not speaking here only of the songs and poems and paintings that have always been part of movements for political and social change, but of the movements themselves, their political ideas and forms of protest. Every important social movement reconfigures the world in imagination. What was obscure comes forward. Lies are revealed. Memories are shaken. New delineations are drawn over old maps. It is from this new way of seeing the present that hope for the future emerges for us. No one can stop us from imagining another kind of future. No one. Not Trump, not Marjorie Green Taylor, not Putin, not your mother's voice that's still in your head. No one can stop us from imagining a new future. Another kind of future, one which departs from the terrible cataclysm of violent conflict, of hateful divisions, of poverty and suffering. Let us begin to imagine the worlds we would like to inhabit, the long lives we will share, and the many futures in our hands. We are on the cusp of a new era. This darkness that Paul McCartney sang of is where we can see the future, the light of the future that is in us now. This is the new horizon. It is welcoming us. Let us go forth with courage and joy as we are creating the world we are imagining. May it be so.